Hi everyone, and welcome to D&D Horror Stories with D&D Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a dungeon master that basically wants to make a Dungeons & Dragons version of 1940s Germany. A story about a D&D player that gets punished by their DM for being late to a campaign, and much more. But before we get into these stories, I think we need to meditate with Simba to boost our resistance to the psychic damage that these stories are sure to inflict. There we go. Now I think we are ready for these RPG horror stories. Character killed because I was going to be late to a game. By Reddit user Legal Avocado 2975. It was game day, Saturday, and the game is held at a friend's house that is in a town an hour's drive away. I'm on the highway that would normally take me there. I say normally because very shortly after I got onto the road, traffic comes to a dead stop. I pull out my phone to see if Waze can tell me where the jam up is, and if it can tell me an alternative route. The jam looks to be about 8 miles long. It was a car accident. And yes, there's an alternative route that will take an hour and a half to get there. So I call my friend David and let them know that I'm going to be late and explain why, sending him some pics of the traffic jam and where I'm at. I also explain how I'm going to have to wrap myself through a town that's north of where he lives and come down that way, and that it's going to be 1.5 hours to get to him on top of however long it's going to take me to get out of the jam, since I'm nowhere near any of the turnoffs that I can take to get back to the road that will take me the other way. I also say, tell DM to start the game without me and run my tune if we hit combat until I get there. David says he'll do that, and I hang up and concentrate on not losing my mind being stuck in this fustercluck. I'm stuck in traffic for 40 minutes before I can get to my turn and start heading there. I text David that I'm clear of the jam and heading there now. I drive there and am a little over 2 hours late to our usual 4-hour session. I knock on the door, and my friend answers and lets me in. He has a look on his face that is concerning. The Dungeon Master said, "You might as well not bothered coming. Your character is dead." I chuckled and said, "Damn, tough combat?" Looking at David, "You did remember the subclass abilities I had, right?" David then said, "We're still role-playing the start of the quest. We were doing downtime stuff, and the quest came to us. We're talking with the nobleman to get the details and discussing payment." I looked back at the DM and said, "What? Why am I dead?" He then said, "Because you were late. I'm tired of that crap, and so I decided to start punishing people who are late." I responded with, "What the hell? Really? Who's done that in this group? Carl is the only one who was late to a session that I know of, and he had a good reason since some jackass ran him off the road and into a ditch. I've never been late before, and this time I was stuck in a frickin' traffic jam." I then pulled out my phone and pulled up Facebook. We have a guy in our area that listens to the police scanner and reports on what's happening on his Facebook page. I pulled up his report on the 5-car collision on the road that I normally take, showed him the pics that I sent David, and said, "Didn't David tell you why I was going to be late?" DM said yes, but then went on about how his other game, Warhammer 40k, has a bunch of people who are late constantly, and he put a rule of dealing with late characters into place, and how it's applying to all of his groups. Not that he ever showed us this rule, but 1 hour late and you're suffering a penalty, 2 hours late and your character dies, and you're out for the rest of the game. If you show up on time the following session, your party may be allowed to get your character resurrected when they get to a temple in a major city, but the cost comes out of your gold reserves, or you can submit a new character 1 level below your party's level. I coldly say, "Fine," and I leave, I'm not sure if I'm going to this weekend's session or not. I'm kinda leaning towards hitting the looking for game boards in my area, as a pickup game at the friendly local game store is looking like the better option. Well, that is a bunch of BS. Being late was totally out of OP's control, and by all rights, OP could have just said screw it and told the group that he wasn't going to make it at all. But instead, OP dealt with the traffic and the overly longer detour he had to take in order to get to the game. And then the DM decides to punish them because of his Warhammer group? I would tell that DM to either get his head on straight and retcon OP's character dying, or he's going to be down a player for the rest of that campaign. And if he still stands by his BS reasoning, then yeah, I would just look for a different game elsewhere, and maybe somewhere closer to home. So yeah, the short of it is, screw that DM. Let's get to the next story, and a quick warning for this one, as it contains themes of SA and other messed up stuff in regards to the roleplay. So if you would like to skip it, you can move on to the story after it via the chapters feature. But with the warning out of the way, let's get into it. Dungeon Master forces my character to go through a, quote, breeding factory, by Reddit user Historica Grandis. I am no stranger to Dungeons & Dragons. I have been playing at my local game shop with various Dungeon Masters and parties for about 6 years now. But about a year ago, I unknowingly walked into what can only be described as the most unhinged fever dream of a campaign I have ever experienced. Our Dungeon Master pitched the campaign as a, quote, dark, morally complex exploration of a dystopian fantasy world. Cool, I thought. Something gritty. Something Game of Thronesy. I rolled up a half-elf rogue, and Session 1 hit the ground running. After we did our intros in the tavern and everything, we were accosted by a band of hobgoblins and their regular goblin slaves. We were captured by an evil hobgoblin empire and sent to a labor camp. During the second session, my character, Lyria, I am a woman in real life, and was in the campaign as well, was pulled aside by the guards for, quote, special processing. It turns out, special processing meant I was being sent to a breeding factory. Oh, what now? A factory where prisoners were forced to produce the next generation of alpha goblins to build an, quote, empire that will last 1,000 years. That sounds oddly familiar. Dungeon Master then leaned in, smirked at me, and whispered in my ear, Lyria's unique half-elf DNA makes her a prime specimen to spread her legs and breed. Well, this DM is officially a creep. He then showed me an AI-generated picture of a, quote, alpha goblin that supposedly took the best aspects of humans and elves to create a master race. So, this DM just basically wanted to make fantasy Nazis. He then described the factory in excruciating detail. There were assembly lines, genetic analysis devices, gas chambers for specimens deemed, quote, unfit. Holy crap, who is this DM? Richard Spencer? And rows of prisoners, and those deemed fit were taken to a special room by a group of, quote, breeder hobgoblins, in which they would have their way with human, elf, and half-elf women. He would describe in the most graphic detail how they would gang SA her. This was the most animated he got the whole campaign, and he kept describing it as, quote, the sexy side of D&D, which really grossed me out. Yeah, this dude is a walking red flag if I've ever seen one. I tried to object in character, but the DM shut me down with the classic, your character wouldn't be able to resist excuse, and said that she was charmed by enough spells to make her, quote, enjoy it. So she's basically just a sack of holes for the goblins to use. Well, that is just disgusting. Really no other words for that description. And then he had the audacity to pull out a chart labeled, quote, breeding success percentages, and had me roll dice to determine my fertility. Wow, this dude really had this all well thought out, huh? A nat 1 meant I died instantly from the gang SA, and a nat 20 means I became their breeding mare for the Empire. He then said, as long as you don't roll a nat 1, you can still go on quests while pregnant. I then got up and noped out of the session. The barbarian player followed me, muttering something about needing ear bleach, while the dungeon master kept yelling about how this is crucial to the story, and that you can come back for revenge if you want. I'm not afraid to kill off some hobgoblin breeders. And it's a dark world. What did you expect? But no. Maybe for some people, but not me. I just hope anyone who jumps into that crap show knows what they are getting into. And I don't blame OP at all for just noping out of there. I mean, even if you were to entertain that idea and setting, OP should have had some rolls against the charm spells, and with advantage, since she was playing a half-elf, which OP confirmed in the post's comments that there were no such rolls. If you ask me, I would say that this DM probably had some sort of fetish for 1930s and 40s Germany, and was using a fantasy world and D&D as a way to pull others into it without their consent. I mean, there is dark fantasy, then there is whatever the heck this was. And what gets me is that this all took place in public at a game store. You would think that the owners would not allow that type of thing within their business. But apparently, when asking OP, she said that the store basically has a, quote, don't like it, find another table policy, and doesn't really care if anyone complains. So, God help anyone who joins this dude's game without knowing what they're getting into. And if I were OP, I would just find a different game store to find games in. I think we could all use some kitty comfort after that story. There we go. That is a bit better. Now let's get to the next post. Tanked my game and stopped DMing completely. By Reddit user EarlyBrick1522. My group wants to play high adventure, high rewards games, but they don't want to earn their rewards. They try and sneak past or run away from anything that isn't going to be an overwhelming victory. They argue if they can't instantly figure out a puzzle or mystery. They refuse to go to the dungeon or face the dragon, ever. I finally snapped in the last session. They decided they didn't want to figure out the mystery, and instead joined the BBEG. I made all the adjustments on the fly, and had them go through a magical forest, and encounter a wagon with 3 fey crones. Part of it was to get their characters into phase with the BBEG's lair. He kept it just to the side of reality, on its own quasi-plane. And part of it was to get them some gear through trades, like a good memory from your childhood, or the promise of naming your firstborn after me, or the memories your friends keep of you. Simple roleplay things. They noticed an extra bedroll, pack, and boots next to the campfire, and the crones said one of their number already made a deal. The pack had a diary keeping track of everything that had happened from session 1, as if this vanished person had been part of the group. It had anecdotes and conversations that only someone who was tight with the players would have known. They were having none of it, and they refused to even interact. They complained that they didn't understand why they were suddenly in a forest, and that they didn't understand the point of the encounter, so they went and hid. They ended up on a warm summer's day in a small village that had its own mystery. This is where they would find the gate to the BBEG. Instead, once faced with a mystery, the innkeeper asked if the two rangers that arrived with them were going to check out later. Basically, they were being told that they had arrived with 2 more party members that they had no memory of. The mystery would have led them to the Undercroft and the final portal. Instead, they tried to just leave town. Once they left town, they walked into a blizzard and were driven back. They then complained that they didn't understand what to do. I finally was like, try doing anything. Ask around, investigate, ask NPCs for information. Just do anything instead of avoiding every breadcrumb and plot hook. But they argued that, quote, "This is what my character would do. Try to avoid being hurt." I just gave up and made the whole adventure be a dream and ended the session. I don't see myself DMing again for a long while because I wrote this long campaign, then rewrote it on the fly for them, and the players refused to participate at all. They just wanted treasure and fun, but didn't want to actually ever adventure or face any challenges. Well, first, I have to say that those were some pretty creative plot hooks that OP made on the fly when the players stated that they wanted to join the BBEG. The whole thing of them not remembering party members that all evidence pointed to their being was pretty neat. Though, like OP said, these players didn't want to actually roleplay anything that would put their characters in any danger of any sort. And at that point, why even play? If anything, it would make sense for these characters to just take up farming or something. I can understand OP's frustrations with doing all sorts of prep, then scrapping it and coming up with more stuff on the fly, only for the players to not take any of the plot hooks. So I don't blame OP for not wanting to DM for that group anymore. Let's move on. The Feywild shenanigans that now make me question my campaign altogether. By a Reddit user, and you will be cured. I, female, joined a Wild Mount campaign about a year ago. My dungeon master wanted to test the Blood Hunter class, as he has never dealt with them before, so I volunteered. My pick was the Order of the Profane Soul, which requires a patron. So, my DM asked me if I am okay with not knowing the exact personality behind my patron, other than him being an archfey and communicating with my character as a voice inside her head. I was totally up for it, and at one point, I felt that my character and her patron had quite a solid father-daughter relationship. Then, our party got into the Feywild, and suddenly, my DM, with a devious smile, reveals to me that the voice I've been hearing all this time was not my patron. It was a voice of a fey creature that my patron implanted inside my brain without my knowledge to spy on me 24/7 and report to him. Moreover, this creature turned out to be a temporary player character of another girl at the table, who got all of my backstory through the DM mid-sessions. So she immediately started making fun of my character for her private habits, which she invented on the spot, expecting me to, quote, yes-and it. I can't lie, I felt pretty creeped out by it, as it felt like my DM and this girl turned my backstory into a gag with a flair of something non-consensual. Our whole campaign had a kind of lighthearted and comedic undertone. However, nothing of this sort was done to any other player characters. When they had a spotlight, it was always serious and meaningful, while the extraction of this fey creature from my ear was described with grotesque details. Perhaps I am overreacting for considering leading the campaign after that? Am I being too sensitive about it? Well, I can see how that could bother a player. Though, as OP has been in this campaign for about a year, I would suggest to her to not leave the campaign over this one instance, as she otherwise seems to be enjoying it. My suggestion would be to talk to the DM about why she didn't like this particular part happening to her character, and didn't like the implications that the other player placed upon her character. If the DM is a good DM, which it sounds like according to OP, then he would probably be receptive to the input and possibly change that tidbit in the campaign. Though, those are just my thoughts. What would you all suggest here? Let's get to the next post. How to tell a DM that his campaign sucks. By a Reddit user, I think I'm concussed. I'm probably gonna sound like an a-hole in this rant, but I'm really not in real life. This is just a frustrated rant. So, I have this DM who I know personally. We're really good friends, but regardless of what he's doing, you can't give him any sort of advice or criticism, or he'll blow up in your face, start yelling at you, the whole 9 yards. He is autistic, so I try to be understanding about it, but it gets really frustrating at times. We're running this campaign. Usually, I'm the DM, but I was in between a short campaign and am writing a longer one, so I decided to let him run a short one in the meantime. However, it turns out his idea of short is 8 months, even though it started out to be 2 or less. I cannot suffer through 8 more months of 3-hour sessions every week, waiting to introduce the campaign I've been teasing and hyping the whole party up for. Half the time in this campaign, we're just in a room doing these quote puzzles, like you need 3 keys, they're all in this room and you need to find them. There's 3 vent holes in the ground and a pile of barrels in the corner. Nothing else is there because you're in a literal cave. Go find them. Or, you unlock this room. There's a chest at the end of a long hall. You need to get inside it, but there's booby traps all around in this specific place, right specifically there, and here. Now you know exactly where the traps are and how to get around them, so go get the chest. It sucks, and it's insufferable, but I can't tell him this, or even how to make it better, or else he'll blow up in my face and start yelling at me, and gaslighting me. I hate to use that word. By saying, "Oh, if it's so bad, I'll just quit running this campaign I worked so hard on. I'm so sorry for wanting to play this game with you guys, who are supposed to be my friends." What am I supposed to do? I can't give him gentle tips. I've tried talking to him in person, but he keeps getting mad and blowing up at me. I'm almost done writing my campaign, and I am hyped to introduce it. My party is also super hyped, and we're all getting extremely impatient, but trying our best to be polite and work through this campaign. I've also been remembering why I hate being a player, which is making it worse for me. What should I do? I'm honestly lost. Man, that does sound like quite a bad position to be in, but I don't think OP is being harsh here. It sounds to me like the current DM of the current campaign is being emotionally manipulative and using his autism as a way to get what they want and avoid any criticism. I mean, I have friends that are on the spectrum, and they are some of the nicest people I know. I mean, sure, there are different severities of autism, but if he is able to run a D&D game and otherwise be sociable as a player, then he should know better than to act this way. Honestly, I would just come out and confront him about why the way he acts, when even given the slightest suggestion, is unacceptable in the nicest way that you can, and that friends don't do that to each other. And if you don't want to play in this campaign anymore, just bow out. You shouldn't have to feel trapped because of the way he acts. Hopefully, he'll realize that he's being a bit of an a-hole, and y'all can start the campaign that you've been working on. though those are just my thoughts. And I'll admit, this one was a bit of a toughie. So how would you all approach this? I'm legit curious. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.